October 6, 2024. Zabakolsky Krai, Russia. The town of Mocha. 11 p.m. In a typical apartment courtyard, surrounded by Soviet-style concrete buildings, a car sits parked under dim streetlights. The temperature is dropping close to freezing, and
However, considering the severity of the crime and the number of gunshot wounds, the judge orders that he remain in pre-trial custody. Investigators later complete the technical examination of the weapon. Experts determine that the non-lethal pistol had been professionally modified to fire live ammunition. This directly contradicts the claim that the act was spontaneous. Results of the forensic psychiatric evaluation confirmed that Sanan was fully aware of his actions, understood the consequences, and was not in a state of uncontrollable emotional outburst. Sanan's parents later come to Ekaterina's family home, asking for forgiveness for their son's actions. They say they had no idea that Sanan was in Mogoa, Russia, or that he had a weapon with him. The suspect himself continues to act as if he is completely certain he is right. While in pretrial detention, Sanan behaves as though he is controlling the entire process, relying on his legal education. For Ekaterina's family, that cold confidence becomes the main source of fear. They begin to worry that his connections and experience as a lawyer could help him avoid the maximum sentence. To understand how this story reached that point, it is necessary to go back 18 years to the town of Mocha in Russia's Zabaykovsky region. It is a small town where in the mid-2000s, teenage life was centered around two schools, School Number 1 and School Number 92. Ekaterina studied at School 92 while San went to School 1. The main place where young people spent their free time was the Railway Workers' Club. Discos held there brought together students from different parts of town. Ekaterina and Sanan met there when they were both 16. Friends describe Ekaterina at the time as an active leader, someone who helped stray animals and organized school events. Sanan, even as a teenager, was already involved in his family's business. The Guseinov family had moved to Mocha from Azerbaijan long before Sanan was born, even after decades of living in Russia. His parents kept traditional views when it came to marriage. According to Ekaterina's sister, his relatives were against the relationship from the very beginning. They wanted their son to marry someone of the same nationality, and were even looking for a bride for him in Azerbaijan. Sanan pursued Ekaterina for nearly 2 years. He was persistent, walking her home and looking for chances to meet in shared groups of friends. For a long time, she did not return his feelings. But in their final year of high school, the two officially started dating. After graduating in 2011, the couple decided to leave Mocha. Sanan made a move people later described as a direct break with his parents' wishes. He refused to stay in the region and followed Ekaterina to Khabarovsk, Russia. In the new city, both enrolled in universities. Sanan chose economics, while Ekaterina. Streets are empty. A Ekaterina man walks out of the building entrance. She tells her mother she will be back in a couple of hours and heads toward her car. At that moment, a figure steps out from the deep shadows and moves toward her. Ekaterina recognizes her ex-husband, Sanan Guseinov, and immediately runs toward her. Began studying crisis management. The move marked the beginning of their independent life together, and during the first years, everything from the outside looked stable and successful. Their time in Khabarovsk became the period when their roles in the relationship finally took shape. Before officially getting married, Ekaterina and Sanan had been together for about 8 years. During that time, the relationship went through its first serious crisis, one that would later be seen as a warning sign of what was coming. After a major argument, Ekaterina decided to end the relationship and secretly left for Moscow to stay with relatives. Sanan refused to accept the breakup. He went after her and spent nearly a month searching for her across the city. When he finally found Ekaterina, he arranged a reconciliation using what friends later described as gestures of regret, including an enormous bouquet of flowers and promises that he would change. Ekaterina forgave Sanan and agreed to the wedding, even though her family, after learning that he had tracked her down, was already strongly against the marriage. The wedding took place in Khabarovsk, Russia. Despite the formal decorations, only about 15 people attended, just the closest circle. One detail stood out. Neither of their fathers was present at the ceremony. Ekaterina's father refused to come, saying he could not support the marriage, knowing how Sanan treated his daughter. Sanan's parents also ignored the wedding, insisting their son should marry someone of his own nationality. For Sanan, the marriage became another way to prove he would do things his own way, no matter who disagreed. After the wedding, the couple focused on business. Sanan, who had a degree in
economics, and Ekaterina, trained in crisis management, opened 3 tobacco shops. Legally, the business was registered under Ekaterina's name. Sanan explained this by saying that a shared business would guarantee they would never separate. In reality, full control over the money and profit. Distribution stayed in his hands. Ekaterina received only a fixed amount for personal expenses. Life in their apartment followed strict rules set by Sanan. He demanded perfect order and absolute cleanliness. Their daily life was also fully transparent. They had access to each other's phones, and the location tracking feature stayed on at all times. From the outside, the marriage looked successful. Inside, the relationship had already turned into a system of total control, with Sanan acting as the only person in charge of his wife's life. The turning point began on January 3, 2023, when Ekaterina told her family she was finally expecting a baby. The first months passed in preparation for the birth of their daughter, but by midsummer, the dynamic between them started to change. In July 2023, when Ekaterina was 7 months pregnant, she noticed unusual behavior from Son. Using the location app on her residential buildings, in the silence of the courtyard, sharp popping sounds echo. Sanan fires at her from behind. Ekaterina collapses onto the asphalt. Later, forensic specialists count 12 gunshot wounds on her body, most of them in the back. Sanan does not try to leave. Phone, she saw that he was regularly visiting an address that had nothing to do with their stores or their friends in Khabarovsk. At the end of July 2023, while checking Sanan's phone, something they both had access to, Ekaterina found proof that he was seeing another woman. The phone contained explicit photos and messages. In one conversation, Sanan told the other woman that his apartment was only for family and that he didn't want to ruin the home atmosphere, so he rented another place for their meetings. That discovery became the starting point of an open conflict. Ekaterina told Sanan she wanted a divorce, but the decision immediately ran into a financial problem. Even though the business was legally in her name, all cash flow and profit control remained with Son. At that moment, Ekaterina had no personal savings. She decided to pretend the marriage was still intact, until birth. The main reason was medical. In Khabarovsk, she was being monitored by a private doctor at a specialized clinic, and moving back to Magadia during the 7th or 8th month of pregnancy, where there were no proper conditions for a complicated C-section, was considered too risky. From that moment on, Ekaterina quietly started keeping track of family expenses, secretly putting aside small amounts of money, preparing for the moment she would be able to leave. In August, exactly 2 weeks before the expected due date, the situation inside the apartment in Khabarovsk, Russia, turns into open aggression. Another attempt by Ekaterina to discuss the terms of a divorce ends with Sanan using physical force. This becomes the first assault in the family that is later documented. Sanan does not try to apologize. Instead, he takes off his belt and strikes her across the legs. One of the swings hits her stomach. Later, Ekaterina records a video showing a clear bruise along her side. During the incident, San directly forbids her from even thinking about leaving. "You're my wife, and you're never going anywhere. We are never getting divorced. Sit down and stay quiet." Right after it happens, Ekaterina calls her sister Evgenia. She is in severe emotional distress, but asks her to keep everything secret from their parents. The reason is their father's condition. At that time, he is undergoing treatment for stage 4 cancer. Ekaterina is afraid that news about the aggression against his daughter could seriously worsen his health. She also reminds her sister that their parents had always reacted very strongly to Sanan's threats, and it had taken a long time for the family to rebuild any kind of relationship with him after previous conflicts. Sanan's physical advantage is not accidental. He has a background in boxing and trained seriously for years, which gave him a strong and controlled punch. In private messages to her sister, Ekaterina writes that emotionally she is ready to leave immediately, but she is afraid to take the scene. According to residents who witnessed what happened, he stays near Ekaterina's car, holding the weapon in his hands. Patrol officers arrive within minutes and take him into custody without resistance. The weapon is seized and sent for ballistics testing. During the arrest and the first risks while her daughter is still unborn. In September, at a clinic in Khabarovsk, their daughter Yasmin is delivered by C-section. Sanan is at the hospital, waiting outside the operating unit. He records the first moment he sees the baby on his phone and shows the video to relatives over a video call. The discharge from the hospital happens with family members present. Ekaterina returns to the one-room apartment with her husband, but her behavior at home changes. To avoid any physical contact with Sanan, she always places Yasmin in the middle of the bed. Between them, Ekaterina begins seeing a therapist who diagnoses severe stress and prescribes sedative medication. She takes the medication daily so she can stay functional and take care of her daughter. Sanan changes the way he works. In addition to the tobacco shops, he starts a car rental business. All new vehicles and business assets are still registered in Ekaterina's name. At the same time, Sanan stops hiding his affairs. He regularly leaves home for several days at a time. When he comes back, their conversations turn into shouting, insults, and constant verbal humiliation. The Ekaterina quietly begins preparing to leave. She gathers documents and personal belongings, packing them into boxes. She moves the boxes onto the balcony, telling Sanan she is just doing a deep cleaning. At the same time, she starts building a financial reserve. She takes small amounts of cash from the business, carefully enough so he will not notice. By the beginning of summer, she has saved the equivalent of about $4,000. The aggression becomes systematic. Son assaults his wife 3 more times. Ekaterina documents every injury. A broken nose, bruises on her arms from being grabbed, and hematomas on her head. On her phone, she creates a hidden folder with video evidence and sends copies to her sister. In one incident, Sanan grabs her by the hair and throws her toward the balcony, while their daughter is in the room. Ekaterina plans to use these recordings in court. To have Sanan stripped of parental rights, she is waiting for the moment when her savings will be enough to leave and survive in another region without his support. June 2023, Khabarovsk, Russia. Ekaterina turns off her phone and leaves the apartment to go shopping. At that time, Sanan is not at home, but he is still tracking her location. After a while, she turns the phone back on and receives a series of messages. Sanan demands that she return to the apartment immediately, saying he is giving her 10 minutes. One of the messages contains a direct threat toward their daughter, who at that moment is at home with a nanny. Ekaterina returns. Sanan meets her outside and orders her into the car. He drives her away from the residential area toward a row of private garages. There, Sanan pulls out a knife. Ekaterina manages to secretly turn on the camera on her phone, part of their conversation. Questioning, Sanan behaves in a calm, businesslike manner. When officers confirm his identity, they learn that the detained man is Ekaterina's former husband. That night, the threats Ekaterina had been saving in messenger chats over the past year finally turn into real. Is recorded. She refuses to get back into the car, saying she is afraid he is going to kill her. During the struggle, San presses the blade against her stomach. Later, medical documents added to the case will confirm the result, a cut wound about 1.5 inches long. After the incident, Sanan leaves. The Ekaterina goes to the nearest police station. At the first station, officers refuse to file a report, calling the situation a typical domestic argument. She goes to another precinct. There, she manages to get help. Police assign 2 officers to escort her while she collects her belongings. The group arrives at the apartment building. When Sun sees the officers, he does not act aggressively. While the officers keep in the hallway, the nanny helps Ekaterina carry the boxes she had prepared earlier on the balcony to the trunk of her own car. Ekaterina takes her daughter and the documents. That same day, she starts driving toward the Zabitsky region. She has to travel more than 900 miles to reach Mocha. Ekaterina drives almost without stopping, under extreme stress. San continues sending messages. In one of them, he writes, "Your life belongs only to me. What you're doing right now is a death sentence." Ekaterina crosses the regional border, taking her daughter to her parents' home. From that moment on, all contact between the spouses stops in person and continues only through long-distance threats and messages. While Ekaterina Mann is in St. Petersburg, Russia, accompanying her father for medical treatment. Their joint business in Khabarovsk is destroyed. One day, employees at all 3 stores arrive at work and find the shops completely vandalized. Sanan still has the keys and the alarm. Codes, and during the night, he enters the buildings. According to the investigation, he uses industrial red paint. Not only the display windows, but the shelves, cash registers, and merchandise are all covered. The entire stock of tobacco products is ruined. Even though the business was legally registered under Ekaterina's name, Sanan had invested more money into it and considered it his own. Destroying the stores becomes the fulfillment of a threat he made earlier: "I will break your life." Instead of trying to divide the business during the divorce, Sanan chooses to eliminate it completely. At the same time, he does not lose his own income. By then, he is already actively involved in buying, selling, and renting cars. Along with the destruction of the stores, San moves to a new stage of threats. He sends Ekaterina a series of voice messages in which he describes in detail how he plans to carry out violent revenge. In the recordings, he says that honor means more to him than his future or money. He openly states that he is ready to face criminal charges and that he does not care what happens after his plan is finished. The threats extend to her relatives as well. San promises to actions. Right after the arrest, Sanan is taken to the police department in Mogocha, Russia. Investigators later describe his behavior in the holding cell and during the first interrogations as unusually calm. Born in 1993, he does not deny his involvement in the shooting. On the contrary, Sanan openly burned down her parents' country house and says he will wipe out every member of the family. These messages show that the destruction of the business was only a step
not the end of the conflict. After returning from St. Petersburg to the Zabakowski region, Katerina's life turns into forced isolation.
She stays at her parents' home in Magawowa, Russia, trying not to go outside without someone from the family with her. During the fall of 2023, the official divorce process begins. Despite his earlier statements that he would never allow a divorce, Sanan does not try to stop the legal procedure. He does not appear at the hearings, because by that time he has already left the Russian Federation. The divorce is finalized without him present. But the control over Ekaterina does not stop. One day, while she is at home, she looks out the window and notices an unknown man walking up to her parked car and attaching something to the body of the vehicle. After checking the car, her father finds a GPS tracker. The device is destroyed immediately. In December 2023, the pressure increases. Ekaterina begins receiving calls from unknown numbers. The callers say they are acting as intermediaries. During one conversation, a man claims that San has already paid for services to have her killed. Ekaterina goes to the local police department in the Magwa district to officially report that someone is preparing a crime against her. She meets with the head of criminal investigations and provides recordings of the calls, along with screenshots of messages where Sanan promises to cut her throat. Ekaterina demands that a criminal case be opened under the charge of making a death threat. However, after reviewing the report, police issue a refusal to open a case. The official explanation states that Sanan Guseinov is on the territory of Azerbaijan, and his actions are classified as remote threats that do not present an immediate possibility of being carried out. Law enforcement says there are no legal grounds for detention and no reason to place Ekaterina under state protection. The situation seems to change when videos from Azerbaijan begin appearing online. The recordings show Sanan at another wedding ceremony. He posts footage on social media, openly showing himself exchanging rings with another woman. The Katerina's family takes this as a sign that the stalking is finally over. They believe that a new marriage and new responsibilities will make him leave her alone. After that, Ekaterina slowly begins to relax the strict safety measures. She starts going out in public again. Messages from Sonnenstetten become rare. He calls only to speak with his daughter Yasmin over video, acting unusually. This period of silence becomes the reason she decides to go out on the evening of October 6th, for the first time in a long while, without fear for her life. To reconstruct the events of October 6th, investigators later conduct a detailed timeline analysis. They determined that Sanan arrived in time. Says he is satisfied with the result. During a personal conversation with Ekaterina's parents, he tells them that she deserved this ending. Sanan is a trained lawyer specializing in criminal law, and that education shapes his defense strategy from the very first minutes. Mogocha, Russia secretly several days before the crime. He did not tell anyone about the trip, not even his parents who live in the same town. All his movements appear to be focused on watching Ekaterina's daily routine. He also had a modified pistol with him, loaded and ready, which clearly indicates. On the evening of October 6th, Sanan takes position in a dark area of the courtyard with a clear view of the building entrance. At 11 p.m., Ekaterina walks outside, telling her mother she will be back in 2 hours. According to the ballistic report, when she approaches her car, Sanan moves closer. The moment she sees him, she tries to run. This is confirmed by the location of the 12 gunshot wounds, most of them in her back and legs. Sanan keeps firing until the weapon is empty. A neighbor from an upper floor becomes the main witness. From her window, she sees a man calmly firing shot after shot at the woman lying on the ground. After Ekaterina stops moving, Sanan does not leave. When people start running into the courtyard after hearing the shots, he points toward the body and tells them to call the police. He does not try to help and does not try to escape into the wooded. Deep crime surrounding the town. His behavior at the scene, along with the technical condition of the modified pistol, becomes key evidence for prosecutors, fully ruling out any claim that the crime happened in a moment of emotional impulse or by accident. February 2025. Sanan Guseinov is being held in a pre-trial detention center in Chita, Russia. By this time, the investigation is complete, and the case files are being prepared for transfer to court for a full trial. However, Sanan uses his knowledge of criminal procedure law to take advantage of a legal loophole. While still inside the detention facility, he signs a contract with the Ministry of Defense. Under the regulations in effect at that time, signing such a contract forces the court to suspend the criminal case. Instead of final arguments and sentencing, the court holds a technical hearing. Based on a request from the military office, the judge orders that San be released from custody and transferred under the authority of a military unit. 12 gunshots fired into his former wife's back, and a proven plan to commit the crime temporarily stop being a barrier to his freedom. The decision causes public outrage in Mocha. A petition against the release of the lawyer responsible for the crime collects more than 8,000 signatures, but legally the process cannot be stopped. In April 2025, Sanan's strategy falls apart. While at a military training center, he escapes. From that moment, he is officially classified as a deserter and placed on the federal wanted list. Authorities launch a regional interception operation. The search lasts 3 days. Military police, Interior Ministry officers, and special units take part. Thermal imaging equipment and drones are used during the search. Sanan is eventually found in a forested area. Case files contain audio recordings where Sanan, even before committing the crime, explains his calculation. He believed investigators would classify his actions as committed in a state of emotional distress. According to his own voice messages, his plan was to receive a 3-year sentence, after which he near the settlement of Pashenka. He is hiding in dense brush, trying to avoid detection from patrol helicopters. At the moment of arrest, he is in extreme physical exhaustion and does not resist when surrounded. The escape becomes his biggest legal mistake. By committing a new crime, desertion, he loses the right to keep the original case suspended. On September 1, 2025, the court announces the final verdict. Sanan Guseinov is found guilty of intentional killing and illegal possession of a weapon. The sentence, 15 years in a maximum security penal colony. But that is not the final term. A separate case under the article for desertion is reviewed by a military tribunal, and the total sentence may increase to 20 years. Today, Yasmin lives under the care of her grandmother. Eugenia's sister is preparing legal documents to have Sanan stripped of parental rights. The family moves to St. Petersburg, trying to leave the story behind. For them, 15 years in a high-security prison is not just a sentence. It is a guarantee that the man who once promised to destroy their lives will remain isolated from society for many years, expected to be released and start what he called a new life. At the first court hearing to decide pre-trial restrictions, instead of admitting guilt or showing remorse, San files a motion requesting house arrest. He argues using legal technicalities, trying to convince the court that detention is unnecessary.